Hello, everybody. And on this Wednesday evening, in what has been a cooler temperature for us in the National Capital Region, Dr. Thadani is, of course, in Mumbai. But for the rest of us in the NCR, the weather has been pleasant and the COVID cases seem to be going down. So, all in all, somewhat more positive news than we've had to face in the last couple of weeks. Welcome again to this discussion. This time around, we're going to be discussing a very pertinent topic, which is the Pfizer vaccine and the indemnity demand that the global pharma giant is asking of the Indian government. To put it in context, Pfizer has received this indemnity protection in the countries where it has made its vaccine available, that is the US and Europe. However, in India, they're still negotiating. Today, there was this big rumor that went around to say that they have received guarantees from the government that they will be protected against indemnity. What does that mean? That means that if someone was to fall sick or lose their life because of this vaccine, then Pfizer is not legally accountable. This is a protection they have received in the United States. In India, we have 3 vaccines at the present time. We have the Covaxin, Covishield, as well as Sputnik 5. None of these 3 vaccines, including Sputnik 5, which is from Russia, are given this protection, which means that if somebody did want to take them to court or hold them liable for any adverse effects from the vaccine, they were free to do so. I have a very informed panel with me today who's going to be discussing the ins and outs of these kind of negotiations. Joining me today, actually first time on our show, are 2 newcomers. There is Mr. Ameet Datta, legal eagle, a lawyer, IP honcho. I've known him for many, many years. In fact, had him help me on a couple of tricky areas. And I'm really grateful that he's joined me today. He is, of course, a partner at Sai Krishna Law Associates. And welcome, Amit. And then there's Dr. Amit Thadani, who is based out of Mumbai. So he's joining us from Mumbai. Thank you so much, Doctor. He has been running a COVID care facility and seen the havoc the pandemic has wreaked on the ground. And I'm really looking forward to getting his insight on these vaccines and what this means for us in India. And of course, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, AIM to all of you. I'm sure you're very happy to see him today. I'm sorry he didn't join us the last time, but he bounced out of the program at the last minute, and then I saw him all over Clubhouse. So
I was listening to Clubhouse. I wasn't talking in Clubhouse. Okay. I was too weak to be talking in Clubhouse. Okay. I got my first shot of Covaxin.
So Abhijit,
Covishield, not Covaxin.
But the last time round you skipped, you said you were getting a vaccine.
No.
Yes.
No.
3 weeks ago.
No. I never got it ultimately. I went there and I couldn't get it.
Oh, okay.
This time I finally got it.
Okay, you got it. Okay. So Abhijit will, of course, then also discuss the adverse effects of getting the vaccine. And so that's a special insight he's going to be bringing in today. And of course, Suhel Seth, who I found is also the CIA, not the CIA. Maybe he is the CIA. I don't know. Suhel seems to know a lot of people, so one can never tell. But CII's, National Committee on Branding. He's the chair of that committee and has a good sense of how, big pharma works. And of course, I mean, if you're not aware of this, I'd love to share this with you. But pharma companies are very aggressive when it comes to their PR and when it comes to taking down other companies. So if you see bad press, the bad press that Bharat Biotech got, or AstraZeneca seems to get regularly, the fact that they're blocked from the North American subcontinent. These are all the pharma battles. So I think Suhel will have a really delicious insight into how big pharma works. But I'd like to really start with Dr. Amit Thadani, who can tell us a little bit about the Pfizer vaccine and as compared to the vaccines that we have in India. So thank you.
Hi, Advaita. Thank you for calling me on the show. Now, the Pfizer vaccine essentially is a new tech which is called the mRNA technology. And What is this mRNA? It's basically a messenger RNA. And this is a messenger which takes a signal to the protein synthesis mechanism of the cell and tells them, look here, I've got something for you. You need to make a protein of this size and shape. And that size and shape basically codes for the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So the protein synthesis mechanism then gets into action and produces that spike protein, which then circulates around, and then the body cells see it and think, oh, that's something odd, and they attack it. And the person develops immunity because now they've developed an antibody response and a B cell T cell response. That is broadly how it works. It's a very fascinating technology, and it's even more fascinating because it was developed so fast. Moderna developed their vaccine over a weekend, and Pfizer developed it in less than a month, because it's now so standardized. They already have the entire structure of the vaccines there in their records. So if any of these viruses, maybe influenza, coronavirus, or whichever one, they just have to see which group does it belong to. Okay, this group, what is the difference between the earlier strains and this strain? There would be a minor modification. They just modify it and it's done. So the technology is dramatically changed, and the way that the things are going to be done here on is also likely to be very different. So that's in short what it is.
That's really interesting. So you mean the Delta variant, which is the term that has been given to the the variant in India rather, that Delta variant, Pfizer is claiming it has very good response to. It's able to beat that.
Yeah, they're claiming it, but when you read the fine print, it actually maybe it doesn't produce as good an immune response as with the other strains, but it still works, and which is more or less in line with AstraZeneca vaccine as well. It produces an immune response, but maybe not as good as the strains which are more prevalent in the UK. So it's more or less the same line. There was a study which came out about 2-3 days back, which is nothing but a sheer publicity pitch saying that Pfizer vaccine worked and AstraZeneca didn't. It's done on 28 patients. Come on. I have a staff of 150 at my hospital.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right. I know. Somebody was telling me that they've been added to this WhatsApp group of Pfizer's because Pfizer is going really hard on its publicity in India in trying to get its vaccines in the market and kind of create that public support for it. Dr. Thadani, you told me when we were talking about this earlier that the vaccine is okay, but the attitude of Pfizer is something that is bothersome. I'd just like you to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, see, they could have done a short bridge trial like the other companies have done. It was not a big deal. It would have taken them 2-3 months. They would have got permission and it would have been in the Indian market maybe 6 months back. There was no real reason for them not to do it other than probably sheer arrogance and the fact that they already had just too many orders to service. So maybe a combination of those two things. Whatever it is, they had ample opportunity to do what Sputnik did. Sputnik is in the market. They are. And, Sputnik came into the market later, international market much later than the Pfizer vaccine. So Pfizer could very well have done, what was needed of them. Why they did not is something they need to answer. It was not such a big deal. They just had to take 1,500, 2,000 patients, which is like half a day's work or a 1 day's work. It was not that big a deal. I don't know what was wrong with them.
Okay. Abhijit, you had a pretty sharp tweet today where you said that, essentially you said a country that does not kind of hold to account big pharma and companies like this is essentially a banana republic. So that seems to be a pretty strong line that you think that India, I'm just reading from your tweet, maybe you meant something else, that India should not really give them that allowance that they're asking for when it comes to indemnity.
Look, the issue here is consistency under law, because the law is the law when it is consistent in its application. The law shorn of consistency is tyranny, and that is what makes you a banana republic. Now, why is it that none of these other companies have asked for these indemnity exemptions? Right? it was the same. My tweet actually had to do with nuclear reactors. And if you remember the nuclear liability clause, which became a big issue between India and America. Now, none of these other companies have been given the indemnity exemption out here. So on one hand, people would have us believe that A, Pfizer is the better vaccine as per this 28 patient study. But B, they are so scared they want indemnity entering the market. C, they've been persistent in their nasty tactics over the last 6 to 8 months. They've been hand-wringing a lot of governments in order to, for pricing and all kinds of other things. I think there's a whole litany of things that Pfizer has done that I don't want to get into. They have been paying a lot of people to do publicity for them, which is why even Indians who tweet about Pfizer, why don't they ever tweet about Moderna and Janssen? Janssen being the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They never tweet about that. There's only one word on their lips, Pfizer. What is so special about this Pfizer vaccine? And you just know when you see Pfizer that clearly there's some kind of a media campaign happening. Dr. Thadani brought out this case of, this publicity overdrive that they're going on. They seem to think that publicity and, holding somebody to gunpoint, seems to be a standard negotiating tactic with Pfizer across the board since this thing started up. You are in desperate straits, therefore you negotiate on our terms. See, the issue is this works when you have a monopoly. The problem is Pfizer does not have a monopoly. You've got 4 or 5 other vaccines on the market. And so, take a hike. You're simply not going to, the situation is simply not desperate enough. And I've not yet seen how much Pfizer is promising to deliver over this short period of time that it warrants such an exemption for them. The second thing is they aren't discussing why. What is so specific? Is it the cold storage chain required that they want indemnity for? With the nuclear liability clause, we had a very clear set of reasons why nuclear suppliers were reluctant to do that. Because their thing is, look, we give you the equipment. It is the constructor of the project, the operator who then, that the world standard is, that it is the operator who is responsible for it. It is the operator who, if faults develop, they are actively responsible for finding those faults. And then we reimburse you for those faults, or we fix those faults as the case may be, as and when things are go wrong. And in any case, the operator prevents cataclysmic failure like we saw at Chernobyl. Remember, Chernobyl was a bad experiment gone horribly wrong. You've never had, for Fukushima, again, was unpredictable circumstances. None of that applies in this particular case. With the nuclear liability clause, there is a case to be made that that was the industry standard. Here, the industry standard does not seem to be an indemnity clause because the industry, all the rest of the industry, the other 4 or 5 producers have all accepted the indemnity. So there's too much here that is simply inconsistent, both with the state of legislation on this and the kind of exemptions that these people at Pfizer are seeking. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Amit, you said that, this is the norm in other countries, and this is the way the world does business as well. And and there should be a fund which really takes care of this aspect of it, a national fund. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so, I think we need to step back because traditionally, at least in let's say the developed economies like Europe or the US, etc., you have national vaccination programs, and you have a PrEP Act, you have the National Vaccination Compensation Act. In the UK, you have the Vaccine Damages Act. These are from 1979, so it's not COVID specific. They made a move to have a no-fault compensation scheme for vaccines because they realized that adverse effects are generational and they're traced over generations. Sometimes the adverse effects you can't actually, your statistical models may be off. You can't foresee what kind of adverse effects are there. There's negligence as well, which are exceptions to these. So a study that was released last year looked at all the WHO members, and they found that 150 odd countries had some sort of legislation or or framework, and about 25 countries had a no-fault compensation plan, including countries in Asia, Japan, China, South Korea, Vietnam, etc. They already had them, and you had the US, you had Europe, you had 16 countries in Europe. They already had these plans. Now, effectively, what these plans say is that, look, you can't predict what the causality is in terms of an adverse effect, etc. So you do away with that. You have a compensation scheme, and that's structured in either of three ways, generally either of three ways. Either the government funds it, or pharma funds it, or insurance payment or cess funds it, or insurance companies funds it, much like our Nuclear Liability Act, where insurance companies and nuclear operators take insurance, are required by law to have insurance providers provide for things, and there's a cap on compensation. So from that perspective, we have these schemes are already there. I think where Pfizer is concerned and where India is concerned, if I recall correctly, the Serum Institute did ask for indemnification about a year ago, at the start of the crisis when AstraZeneca was announced and the initial emergency approvals were granted. They did write to the government. In fact, I think twice or thrice. The government wasn't in the mood, and the nuclear liability provisions took years, to come to fruition. So that's the way the government works. I'm afraid it's simply too late to now consider the government is in some negotiating position to negotiate on what the contours will be and how hard I'll negotiate. I don't think we are past that. I think we are at a point where you either need the vaccine, you're short of numbers, you're short of different vaccines, you need the vaccine, and you need to get them into the market, you need to start vaccinating people, and you don't have choices now. Now, Pfizer can hold out. Perhaps a year ago, when Pfizer was chomping at the bits along with other people, then that may have been a different issue altogether. And you will need to bring in a law now, because you have the Consumer Protection Act, which is, as a law, it stands beside, parallel to, and unaffected by any other law. So you will have actually to bring a legislation now, ordinance, legislation, whatever, to kind of build a legal basis for this. And I think there's a crying need. If you are going to have this, then you need to have a no-fault compensation plan, because there must be some level of compensation available for people from adverse effects, however small a part of the population they may be, or in cases of negligence and breach or violation of laws. We do have a compensation scheme, I want to point out, under our clinical trials law. So there is an administrative-led compensation scheme where you can claim for an adverse effect and actually get compensation. I'm not aware how many claims have been given. There's been one claim in a court in Madras, I believe, from one clinical trial, but I don't believe that it's worked. But at least the framework is there. So there's a basis for saying that India should have thought about this earlier. We have not thought about it. That's a fact. We should have thought about this. We should have created this framework. I mean, other countries are not crazy that they're putting these schemes into place, because they realize that the emergency and the exigencies of the situation demanded a middle path. And now you've basically got Pfizer obviously being able to call the shots now because you need the vaccines.
You're on mute here.
Suhel, I'm curious to know from you what you think of this particular situation. It's quite clear that Pfizer is undertaking a huge campaign to get their vaccines into India. Do you think the government really has no choice at this point of time to negotiate, or can they still do that? Do they still have wriggle room? Because like Abhijit said, and I tend to agree with him, we can't kind of not let them be held accountable at all. What stops us from becoming this human laboratory?
So let me start by making full disclosure. I have never ever tweeted in favor or disfavor of Pfizer. I'm not a gun for hire.
Yes.
At the same time, Pfizer has been in India since 1966, which is around the time that your parents were thinking of marrying. So you weren't even born then.
My parents were in school, but that's okay.
There you are. So there you are. I was born in 63, so I can talk with a lot more gravitas and age. But from 1966 till this day, they've been functioning in India. My mother, who's undergoing her chemo and because of cancer, blah, 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 has a drug, needs a drug, a medicine called Folvite, which Pfizer makes. So Pfizer is not the evil company that we make it out to be, but is it a for-profit company? Of course. I mean, so is the BJP or the Congress. They are for-profit organizations pretending to be political parties. I have three logical contentions to make. Number one, when Pfizer approached the government of India in November or December of 2020, the government of India, through its Drug Controller General of India, DGCI, one of the most useless organizations that is available in this country, second only to a few others, which I can't name because I don't want to be hauled up for privileges and all that. Those jokers said, no, we will not allow clinical trials, or we allow clinical trials of this kind, blah, blah, blah. Second, the vaccine problem has not been created by Pfizer for us. We have created our own set of problems. Beggars cannot be choosers, goes the adage. Today, if we have to vaccinate 70 crore people by December, we need 140 crore jabs. This is not going to be possible at a 10 crore per month production of serum and a 6 crore per month production of Bharat Biotech and whatever you might get from Sputnik. You have to spread the basket thin. I mean, let's be logical, forget everything. Now let me come to the third. There is a company that is operating in your country since 1966. They have a structure in your country. They have a general counsel, as Amit will know how these companies work. They know the laws of the land. So they are not some overnight marauders who have just got onto a camel and marched into your country saying, we will give you a vaccine, you give us indemnity. Obviously, they have figured that there may be repercussions based on usage, side effects, fatalities that they need to guard themselves against. Also, please remember, and Amit is actually the expert on this panel, along with Abhijit, who is my go-to expert on every issue, from Koshamangsho to cancer. The problem, Advaita, is that some of these companies then get class action suits filed against them in their countries of origin. Okay, no company will take that risk, especially if it's an American company or a multinational company. They will willy-nilly indemnify them. Now I come to the third point. Fourth point actually. The fourth point is that given our efficacy of cold chain management and logistics, should something go wrong, it is typical of us as good Indians never to blame ourselves, but to blame others. If that begins to happen, there will be consequences which will be felt, and the reverberations will be across the board, which is why Pfizer is asking for the indemnity. I think Amit or Dr. Thadani or perhaps Abhijit gave this comment saying, Serum asked for it and Bharat Biotech asked for it. But, Serum has and Bharat Biotech have little arm for wriggling, little wriggling space because they're Indian companies. The government can screw you in more ways than you can imagine, in more positions than the Kama Sutra says. So you have to worry about that too. So look at the reality of how corporations have to act in India. And ask Amit today. We in our country have completely obliterated any kind of sovereign guarantees that we give. If we lose in an arbitration to a company abroad, yes, we don't honor it. And this has been, if we want to tax Vodafone, I brought Vodafone into India from a marketing perspective. Vodafone, our transaction that was done offshore, not on Indian shores, you lost in the Supreme Court. What did Pranab Mukherjee do? He brought about retrospective taxation going back to 1963. Now you tell me, when you play truant like this with the law, which company in the world will look towards you for any guarantees? They'll say, साला यहाँ तो कुछ मिलेगा ही नहीं, जो मिलता है वो ही ले लो. तो मेरे कहने का मतलब ये है अद्वैता जी कि जब आप भैंस देखते हो तभी तो चारा डिसाइड करते हो. अगर आपको मालूम है कि आपको इस देश में ऑपरेट करना है, तो यहाँ पे जो असुविधाएं हैं उसको लेकर, उसको फैक्टर करके आप बढ़ेंगे आगे. These companies are severely and heavily accountable to their shareholders. They're not interested in a television program or a YouTube thing like this. So मेरे कहने का मुद्दा है कि फाइजर अगर आपको बोल रहा है कि हम इंडेमनिटी ही के बाद आपको वैक्सीन देंगे, आपके पास दो चॉइसेस हैं, या हाँ या ना. उनने तो आपके माथे पे बंदूक रख के नहीं बोला कि आप हमारी वैक्सीन ही लेंगे और जो हम कहेंगे वो आप करेंगे. और आप भी जानते हैं और मैं भी जानता हूं और अमित तो बहुत ही बढ़िया तरह जानते हैं, जो हमारा जुडिशियल सिस्टम है, अगर वहां उनको कोई ड्यू प्रोसेस ऑफ लॉ मिलनी है, पहले तो जूही चावला गाएंगी, 20 साल बाद फाइजर की बारी आएगी. मेरा ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स यहां पे ही मैं शेष करता in Bengali.
Dr. Thadani, there is a question from a viewer. He wants to know, this is from Live India, he wants to know what are the side effects of the Pfizer vaccine? What have there been bad side effects, or what is the situation?
Yes, it is by and large a very safe vaccine, and that's proven now because it's been given to tens of crores of people across the world. The major issue with the Pfizer vaccine is only allergic reactions. So there is a substantial risk of allergic reactions, which again seems to be more in the Caucasian population, which somehow has a higher tendency for allergic reactions to everything. So in India, this problem is not likely to be particularly high. Even the Indian ethnic population, which is there in the US, doesn't show a particularly high incidence of of allergic reactions as such. So by and large, I don't think that there would be too many reactions. There is the risk of thrombosis, which was so much hyped with AstraZeneca vaccine, which is itself not much, is also very, very negligible when it comes to the Pfizer vaccine. So it's generally a pretty safe product as such.
And can we be assured that the vaccine that they're supplying to the US is the one that we'll get over here as well, and we won't be it won't be tweaked, since you said in your opening comments that it's easy to genetically modify this vaccine, that it won't be tweaked for the Indian populace and we don't end up being some sort of human lab. I know you're laughing, but just a thought.
No, I don't think that. It will cost them a huge amount of money to do the tweaking. I don't think any corporate is going to spend that.
Okay, fine. I have to ask that. I have to ask it. So Abhijit, bottom line is Sputnik is sort of cooperating with us. They obviously they've even partnered with Dr. Reddy and we're now producing the vaccine in India. We've imported the first lot, and then soon we'll be having our own vaccines out there, India produced. Pfizer, of course, is not going to share that technology, and Bill Gates infamously recently said that they shouldn't, and he used India as an example, which has really made him very unpopular in our country. And he's having a bad year as it is. What do you have to say about this? And Amit can come in on this as well, because this is copyright and patent and all of those things.
Look, the thing about IPR is, what we know is it slows down innovation. There is absolutely no proof that giving up the patents on this is in any way going to speed up vaccine production or make the vaccine more equitable or things like that. Because remember the kind of infrastructure that goes into producing it, the bioreactors, because this is the first large-scale vaccine that we're producing using mRNA. And the kind of bioreactors and things require quite some time to set up. So what happens out here is The IPR argument is valid when it comes only to slowing down innovation, not in terms of vaccine equity. Right? We need to make that. Unfortunately, people attacked Bill Gates for all the wrong reasons for that particular statement that he made. Number one. Number two, when there is a class action, we have to understand the people who actually should be worried about class action is when you can prove negligence or deception, right? Which, like Amit pointed out, is an exception to the indemnity clause thing anyway. In the specific nuclear case, it was somewhat different, that even negligence or could not, though deception came under criminality, but even there was a shield for it. So I don't know how medical law is that different from the nuclear standard in that particular case. The second question we need to ask is, if Pfizer has been operating and knows the lay of the land of India since 1966, why is it suddenly in 2021 that they want this particular exception for this particular product? And that too, when, there is a good faith basis for saying that you probably did not know what the long-term consequences were going to be anyway, which will anyway be bogged down for 30, 40 years. And mind you, when India gives an indemnity, like Suhel pointed out, it is always open to renegotiation in India because you'll just legislate your way out of things, right? Today, you'll give them an indemnity, then you'll, like Pranabda and his retrospective tax, you'll then say there will now be retrospective no indemnity, right? Number three, and this is the most important point. I am yet to hear from Pfizer, because remember, every country has bought up a huge stock of vaccines. What is it that they are bringing? How are they changing the vaccine supply situation so dramatically in the next 3 to 6 months that Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech and Reddy cannot?
Excellent.
Because till then, they have absolutely no real cards that they're bringing to the table. I would support a one-time waiver, specifically if they were planning to give us absolute bulk within the next, and jump the line within the next 3 to 6 months, saying we'll give you enough to vaccinate about X percentage of your population in the next 2 to 3 months. This isn't. So it isn't, even the opportunity cost doesn't work out here.
Suhel, yeah.
So I just want to address 2 points that Abhijit made. Point number one, since they've been here since 1966, and not that Pfizer has come and whispered into my ear, but why are they seeking indemnity now? Please remember, after the Spanish flu, when there was no process of vaccination or manufacture of vaccination as refined as we have today, for almost every other thing, time was always in favor of the producer of those vaccines. Can I tell you, you asked Dr. Thadani, what we have done even with clinical trials is abysmal. Clinical trials that should take a certain amount of time have been compressed. So you've actually fast-tracked everything. So, to blame Pfizer or Moderna or Bharat Biotech or Serum ki bhai aapke man mein koi human value nahi hai is incorrect. Second, which is a very important point that Abhijit made, saying that, look, what will happen, or how will Pfizer be different than Serum and Bharat Biotech in terms of giving us bulk? Do you remember on April the 5th, there was a tweet from Adar Poonawala saying we need 3,000 crores of funding from the central government. That money came eventually on the 28th of April. The first time in the history of India that the central government gave funding to a private enterprise, both they and Bharat Biotech got 1,500 crores. These people don't have the capacity either to invest or to ramp up like a Pfizer does. So if Pfizer is willing, as Abhijit rightly says, to ramp up supplies, see, we have a critical issue here, Advaita. No one has touched upon this. I have a 1.5-year-old daughter. Okay. Today in America, ages 12 and above, you can get the vaccine. Mostly Pfizer or Moderna, whatever the hell you get. Where are we in India? You have, if you look at our demographics, between 70 to 76 crores, because this goddamn census data doesn't get updated. 70 to 76 is your adult population. What are you going to do about the balance 60, which is your younger population? Today, the Prime Minister and the government have said 18 and above. That's your vaccination universe. What happens to children from 0 to 18? Will you be allowed to do clinical trials on them? No. You tell me which Indian, I mean, I hate this, which Indian mother or father, mere bachche pe aap clinical trial karo. No, there are severe societal issues. And yet you need that. Because as I've always said, no one is safe until the last person on this planet is safe because of the virus being what it is. So we have to factor all this in. Now, if Pfizer says because of the technology that we've got in America through vaccinating younger age groups, we can replicate that in India, what's the harm? And you tell me, companies will say indemnity. Even a company like Perrier, when many, many years ago, traces of benzene were found, that company had to shut down and reinvent itself. Companies will not take this reputational risk of giving you second-hand stuff.
Johnson & Johnson.
Well, we're not living in those times. We're not living in those days. Arey yaar, kuch bhi chalega. India is not a third world country as people used to imagine us to be. We have enough global heft, we have enough global power and global influence. You think these guys are going to take that risk? So my limited point is, if Pfizer can replicate two things, production, as Abhijit rightly said, can we ramp it up? Can we produce in bulk? Two, is if you have the technology, means the scientific heft and wherewithal to vaccinate people from age 0 to age 18, I would welcome you with open arms. Do you know people are talking about the new strain, the Delta, blah, 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 affecting children? You tell me, how many children can we afford to lose? On last count, you had 2,918 orphans, which is calculated orphans because of COVID, where they have lost both parents. But you had 7,800, or that's the figure I read, I may be completely wrong, of children who have died of COVID. And this is what we can see. A lot of data from rural India doesn't come in or comes in much later. So we have a worrisome situation. If someone can solve the problem, so be it. And yes, I agree. We don't need to go out on a limb, but our track record in honoring agreements, honoring international treaties, in honoring sovereign guarantees has been so abysmal. No one believes you.
So GCD, one of our viewers is saying it takes about 3 to 4 years to get a lab vaccine facility get approval. He's saying that's how long it takes. That's one of our viewers.
Sorry, Advaita. Just to add a quick two-finger intervention to what Suhel said. It's ramping up production. For Pfizer to get that exception, it has to promise to ramp up production in a set period of time that is significantly compresses the vaccination window more than what Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute can. That would be the USP that Pfizer brings. Sorry. Yeah.
There's another aspect here, Advaita, if I can intervene.
Sure. Just one intervention. Dinesh Patel, one of our viewers, is saying that Covaxin is starting trials for 2 to 18-year-olds soon. So if that's true, that's good news.
In fact, that they are already doing trials for nasal vaccine.
Right.
For 12. Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Amit.
This is not, and I don't want to again sound like a shill for Pfizer or some company, but you're looking at only from the perspective of Pfizer wanting protection. As Suhel correctly said, please look at it from the reality of our Indian judicial system. If I today have an adverse effect and I want to make a claim out of a vaccination curve, let's take an analogy. Look at the Johnson & Johnson case on the hip transplants. What happened there? Johnson & Johnson offered 25 lakhs for fatalities and for people who had life-changing, life-threatening, altering, they were disabled. 25 lakhs per case. Compare this with the torts cases and damages, punitive, egregious damages, compensatory damages that the US grants. Okay, even that case is now going to wind its way through the judicial system. The government wanted 1 crore, 1 crore. That's the value of an human being's life, and that's going to wind its way through the system. Now you consider an adverse effect where you will have to prove the science, the causality, that my adverse effect was because of the vaccination. You're going to have to have that sort of expert evidence led in a court. Look at it practically. A no-fault compensation program. Now, obviously, before I say it, let me preface that and say the American PrEP Act compensation program is an abysmal failure. It is a sellout to Big Pharma because they wanted to keep the cost low. The national program for vaccinations, which is a separate program, has worked. Billions of dollars have been given. Over the last 10 years under the PrEP Act, not more than $3.5 million or $4 million has been given as compensation. So it's the other extreme of a compensation program. But to build a reasonable compensation program where citizens of this country, look, these vaccines were developed against Project Warp Speed, and you jumped over the various years and years of testing that vaccines normally went through. So it's reasonable for a manufacturer to say, I'm sorry, I'm happy to crunch the science, but give me some element of protection. And now that reasonable element of protection, in my personal view, is to say that we will have a compensation, no-fault compensation program where Ameet Datta does not have to prove that because of Covishield he had an adverse effect. He can make a claim. And as long as that fits between the sets and the assessment, scientific assessment, like you have in other countries, he has a right to compensation. And the compensation can be funded. This is not rocket science. You've done it. You've done it through insurance programs. The US does it through cess, 75 cents to 25 cents on the price of the medicine or the vaccination. It does it through that. So it's not as if it's going to come, it needs to come out of the government's pocket or from anybody else's pocket. Pharma can get insurance. So I think that there is a compelling case for this. Again, the point I'm trying to make is, what leverage do you have as a country now to be able to set up that infrastructure in this warp speed, so to speak, to be able to have the vaccines delivered in time ahead of the Happy New Year 2022 deadline when every Indian is vaccinated.
No, also, Advaita, you have enough idiots in our country who have made vaccines a topic of nationalism. Oh, Covaxin is Indian, Covishield is not, we must be Indian, buy Indian. Damn fools. We are in the middle of the worst crisis of our lifetime. You shouldn't be worried about whether your vaccine is Indian or foreign or Fijian. What you should worry about is, will it save lives? Will it help people live? So this stupid argument by Covaxin is better than this thing, Pfizer is American, so screw them, Moderna. Bhai, aapka Covishield kaun sa aapke desh ka hai? वो भी तो टेक्नोलॉजी आपने ऑक्सफोर्ड एस्ट्राजेनेका से ली है. So I'm saying, for all purposes, praise Bharat Biotech for what they've achieved, but don't decry what is also coming your way, because the world doesn't have a choice.
But please don't use Chinese vaccine. Use even Brazilian vaccine, but not Chinese vaccine. Because that is failing. 55% failure rate in Brazil or something like that. Yeah. So not the Chinese vaccine. But just to add something to what Ameet said, see, this argument cuts both ways. Because even an indemnity given isn't worth the paper it's written on. Because correct. Indian legal somersaults are so much that they'll give you the immunity to class action today. And tomorrow they'll change the law and say that it was done under coercion. Therefore, we had no this thing. In fact, the to fro on this, the case saying that, public statements saying that India doesn't really have negotiation room will actually come back to haunt them later on, saying, see, all the public intellectuals said we didn't have negotiation room. Therefore, it was done under public duress. So we don't accept any hostage agreement. What will you do?
आप मेरे को बोलिए.
I have a quick question.
The only vaccine
still,
in addition, 1 minute. The only vaccine in addition to the Chinese vaccine that I will not take is if a vaccine is ever produced by Pakistan. Those buggers can't produce a pakoda. What vaccine will they produce? But having said that, you look at the hypocrisy. You know, you tell me how many people who will say, yeah, be Indian, buy Indian. When there's a shortage, when there are no vaccines available, you'll go for whatever is there. Do you know the crisis today? And this is a real crisis across India, especially rural India. Now the government is saying, "Aap mix kar lijiye doses." Because this is not sambar that you mix with chutney and gunpowder. What do you mean mix the doses? You have some stupid people who have said that day before yesterday.
Canada said it like officially. Canada said it officially that you should.
Canada is run by Justin Trudeau.
I know.
Yes, I won't trust Justin Trudeau. I'm sorry,
elegance. But why would you believe him for his intellect?
Justin Trudeau
is like asking Rahul Gandhi for a scientific explanation.
I would rather take the Chinese vaccine than trust Justin Trudeau.
Really?
Okay, but
honestly,
this is something
I will rather take
Dr.
Sinopharm than take Justin Trudeau.
No, even Dr. Soumya Swaminathan has, in fact, in one of her talks, said this, that there are certain immunological advantages to mixing of vaccines, but they simply do not have any data to back it up. Hence, they are not recommending it. Okay. Now, other than the one trial which mixed Pfizer and AstraZeneca, there is actually no other trial where it has been shown to be of benefit. And even in that trial, there were some issues. It wasn't a very, very clean trial. So we do not have data as of now to advise mixing of vaccines. I don't think anybody is going to advise.
No, I'm not a scientist. Dr. Thadani is a medical expert. I will only tell you one thing. I'm deeply disappointed about the confusion that has been created and not even bringing Baba Ramdev into it. Park him on the side. Can you tell me, first they said, 2 weeks, 4 weeks gap, 6 weeks gap, now 84 days. Arey 84 mein kya aapne havan kiya tha ki aapko 84 ka number mila? It has caused rampant confusion.
Yeah.
Anand Sridhar, one of our viewers is saying, yes, there is actual scientific basis about mixing vaccines. So one should not talk about scientists like that. Specifically, Suhel Seth, he said.
This is the problem with most of your viewers. They type when they should actually be listening. On the contrary, I said, you are advising us mixing of doses. And as Dr. Thadani rightly just said, but obviously that guy was so busy typing so that he gets his name covered, he didn't hear Dr. Thadani, that there is no provable data on its efficacy. He just said that. Why don't you do one thing? Also provide some of your listeners with earbuds. People asking stupid questions should be gifted one box of Johnson's earbuds.
There you go.
Also to remember that it is quite possible that mixing of normal vaccines, there is in fact significant data on mixing vaccines boosting immunity. The issue is because this is the first time we are using an mRNA vaccine, we don't know if those results are duplicable in the case of mRNA. It may very well be, logically speaking, but it may not, which is an issue.
You know, there's one more thing that I want to bring up here. Novavax is at risk of its manufacturing ability. This is news from 2 days ago because they have still not received the raw materials from the United States. So in this kind of Pfizer situation that's going on, I'm sure the governments are also talking because Pfizer does exercise a certain amount of control over their government, as we've seen already. Do you think, we should really talk about this raw material? Anyone can answer that. Abhijit.
So
in the US,
discussed this with
the president has, what is the Defense Production Act?
Is it a network issue, I guess?
I think it's a network issue.
I didn't get that. Can you hear me?
In the US, the American government has put into effect. Biden came in, he brought the Defense Production Act, which prioritizes the US domestic efforts.
Trump did that. Trump did that, didn't he?
It's a matter of law. They've said that they will prioritize helping getting raw materials for Novavax over the last month. But the fact is that traditionally the US has prioritized its needs. They will prioritize their needs.
I mean, again, they have to worry about their citizens.
Yeah, you consider intellectual property law in this country, especially patent law, from the 70s started with this wonderful report, Iyengar Committee report, and the whole theology of patent law was increase, strengthen domestic healthcare, pharma. That's how you had the Ciplas and Cadilas, etc., and then India kicking, screaming through the black box, and 2005, and we joined TRIPS, etc. All that happened. And today we are at a reverse sort of thing because we've had Novartis, we've had compulsory license cases before. And now there's obviously no discussion about compulsory licenses because nobody wants to pull that trigger. That's a power the government of India has, emergency use. Now, obviously, if you pull that trigger, it's scorched earth. Because what's going to happen is that you are going to have retaliation on the trade side across sectors there. And so you don't want that. So this government is clearly not interested, in pulling that trigger. And so while we have provisions which could have done this, again, I come back to the point, why at this 11th hour are we discussing these aspects? These are aspects that should have been seen, kind of over the horizon.
Exactly. And this has been a worry since day one. What was the government sitting and twiddling its thumbs for so long?
Yeah.
And in case you didn't know which vaccine was going to pan out or whatever, why didn't you order the study to be done simultaneously with the initial release of those vaccines? Because by this time, given when those vaccines rolled out, by this time, you should have had a comprehensive data set, at least an initial data set, if vaccine mixing works or not. So you don't pre-order your vaccines like every other country is doing. You then use the most stupid of economic methods, which is price control and God knows what else to skewer the market. Then you come up with variegated pricing, which we know is a heavily market distorting mechanism. It's just the litany of mistakes just keeps piling up. Right.
There is Vimal Nair sort of.
The problem is that if you get me to try and build a ship, then I will build a paper boat for you, which will sink. And that's the problem. Because you don't have people versed in the art, people who are not ready. And I go back to that old story. When India went to negotiate the WTO, you had 150 academics and bureaucrats who had spent decades in the US training on trade. And on this side, you had a gentleman who had just been released from the shipping ministry. And so from that perspective, we've continued that tradition. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And Advaita, we have such brilliant scientists in our country. I will ask any one of you, name the head of the CSIR. Who's the head of the Council for Scientific Research? We don't know. We don't celebrate our scientists. 1930, Sir C.V. Raman got the Nobel Prize in science. 1930. Indian Institute of Science was set up almost 80 or maybe 100 years ago. If we do not invest in science, we do not invest in R&D, we don't invest in these things, you're bound to have these situations. So if you genuinely believe that we need to reduce dependency on global pharma companies, which we should over time, why on earth don't we invest in our country, in our scientists?
Exactly.
Most of the brightest people go abroad. And then we are happy. अरे यार सुंदर पिचाई अपना है, इंडियन है, वो देखो कितना बढ़िया कर रहा है. पर वो गया क्यों? सत्य नडेला गया क्यों? क्योंकि आपने ऐसा इकोसिस्टम यहाँ पैदा कर रखा है कि the brightest people don't want to stay because they're not the utsahan or the money or the wherewithal or the ecosystem to do great work.
No, this Vimal Nair has really reiterated what Abhijit said. Pfizer can be given a conditional indemnity if they can guarantee X million of doses within the next 3 months. Else, let's pass on Pfizer.
Not 3 months. It's not 3 months. It is before Serum and Bharat Biotech can scale up and deliver the same numbers. That is the negotiating leverage that Pfizer has. So it shouldn't be 3 months. Even if it's 6 months, it's fine, as long as they're able to promise us bulk delivery quicker.
Correct.
Because it is the lives of your citizens that is absolutely important. Now, even agar negligence se 100-200 log marte hain, given the greater public good of having vaccinated because of that bulk, having vaccinated, 300-400 million people, that is a price worth paying, because it has to be for the greater common good.
I have a reader who's
my thing is,
you just quickly view. I don't know if this is true. He's saying Pfizer has donated $65 million to the Biden campaign. Is that true or false? I don't know.
So who cares?
How does it matter?
Who cares? Yeah.
How cares?
How does it matter?
Yeah,
This is what I'm
exactly.
saying.
How does it matter?
Batman.
Yeah, I mean, what is the relevance? What is the relevance? This level of
in India.
this level of stupidity lowers the discourse. I mean, you compare apples and oranges. He's given 65. But that day you all said Twitter gave some money to RSS. How does it matter? I mean, these are stupid analogies. My limited point as we are coming to the end is as follows. We are not in a position to choose given the gravity of the situation. As Abhijit rightly said, our priority is to make sure every Indian is vaccinated, not because we love vaccines, but we want people to live. Number two, rather than talk about science and research and development now because we are facing this crisis, this should now become part of our situation. Number three, you spend 1.26% of your GDP on healthcare. It's a goddamn shame. Absolute bloody shame. We need to re-examine that. Number four, we are celebrating Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, you have completely ignored rural India and what is happening with the healthcare infrastructure there. जब तक आप वो ठीक नहीं करोगे, भारत ठीक नहीं होगा. आपके 2-3 पॉकेट्स ठीक लगेंगे आपको, पर भारत ठीक नहीं होगा.
That you brought up rural India. I just want to speak about Project Bhuli. It's an initiative that I am co-founded and part of. It's to provide COVID care kits in the hill villages of Uttarakhand, who in the best of times, and Dr. Thadani will know this, he worked during the floods of 2013 and actually fixed a fracture that was 15 days old during that time. So this is a part of the country which really has issues with medical assistance. So we are providing them COVID care kits. There's some of these villages you have to walk 22 kilometers to actually get to. Others, there is no road, no mobile phone, no internet. So we're really facing a lot of challenges. If you would like to join us, please do email us at info@bulli, BHULLI.in. So just wanted to share that, info@bulli.in. And Dr. Thadani, one message from Miss S, from one of our viewers again, who wants to ask you that this mRNA technology is very new and we do not know the long-term effects of this vaccine. So she just wanted to get a sense of what are the risks of taking this vaccine if it does become available, and what about this technology?
See, basically what the vaccine is doing, it's waving a flag and then disappears. Okay. It's not as if the mRNA is going to keep, stay put in your system. It would be there for a few minutes and then disappear. So to say that something that gives you a signal for a few minutes and then disappears, leaving the body to, manage its own immune response, is going to cause long-term problems, actually it doesn't make too much of sense. Okay. So I don't think that there's really going to be any long-term fallouts as such from the vaccine. Whatever has to happen with vaccination would generally happen immediately. And now we have at least, a year's data now nearing, because the first trial started in May last year. So now we have data for more than a year, and really nothing has happened, as such. There is no epidemic of big disease going on. There is no epidemic of heart attacks or strokes as was feared. So nothing of the kind is actually happening.
To support Dr. Thadani, and this has been told to me by not one but many medical experts. People are taking the vaccine. They are hiding their comorbidities.
Yes.
Comorbidities are working in parallel to whatever, the immunity or the non-immunity building of that particular individual. For instance, let me give you scientific information. When you take or when you are undergoing chemotherapy, your immunosystem is already compromised. If you have taken a jab before your chemo has begun, for let's say the 11 or 12 weeks that you take the chemo, when you do the spike test, you will not see antibodies rise above 65 if your meter is 250. Now, people are saying, "Arey yaar, vaccine ka koi effect hi nahi hua." We never are transparent about our health. Neither are our leaders, nor are we as Indians. We will never declare what our comorbidities are. Our medical insurance or health insurance companies are equally irresponsible. So you're living in a situation where it's the blind leading the blind. So what can the poor medical practitioners do? They are working 24/7, sacrificing limb and life to make sure that India lives. But somewhere the government has to start investing.
Yeah.
Political parties spend thousands of crores on electioneering, which is fine. But then think about the people who are coming there masked, unmasked to support you. I mean, you're inviting them into a death trap or a death chamber. So let this be a wake-up call. The debate is not only about Pfizer or Moderna or Bharat Biotech or Serum. The debate is, where do we as a country go from here in terms of self-sufficiency? See, it's damn good to say Atmanirbhar. अरे घंटा आत्मनिर्भर. आत्मनिर्भर के लिए आपको प्लानिंग करनी होगी, प्रोसेसेस प्लेस करने होंगे और पैसा. Planning, process and paisa. Where is all that coming?
Absolutely. And you raised a very important point about medical practitioners. I just want to highlight here that today it was reported that in Assam, there was a young patient who died, and his relatives, numbering as many as 24 plus, went ahead and beat this man brutally. And I'm very happy that, the CM of Assam, the new CM of Assam, Himanta Biswa Sarma, immediately took cognizance of it, followed up on the case personally, and 24 of those people have been arrested. But this kind of bullying of medical professionals, especially at this time, is absolutely disgusting.
Yes, but at the same time, one of your famous journalists is going into an ICU and shooting footage. It's a bloody crime. This woman should be booked under the National Disaster Management Act. How dare any journalist go into an ICU? Do you know people whose relatives or whoever loved ones are in the ICU for COVID? You're not even allowed to meet them. Here, journalists are entering with camera. कि भाई देखो क्या क्या हो रहा है, क्या स्थिति है, क्या situation है. You're interrupting medical work. There was an earlier anchor who had done it also. I can't remember, from some Hindi channel. I mean, this bizarreness has to stop. Our medical practitioners are not there for display. They are there to save lives.
Dr. Thadani, this is not allowed, right? Going into ICUs and recording a show there and saying things like people are dying, young people are dying. And, I think it would be so stressful for even the patients around.
It's not the first time and it's not going to be the last time, right? I mean, what the earlier anchor had done actually was far, far worse than what has happened now. Yeah. I mean, she had literally gone to the extent of the doctor is already overworked, overstressed, and she was after his life that usko nahi dekh rahe ho, usko nahi dekh rahe ho. I mean, are you going to tell him whom to prioritize, whom to treat? So I would say that this was at least better. She was respectful and moved out at the right time. But of course, they have no place over there. They should not be there.
Nowhere
in the world is allowed at all. So
but also, please look at all of this from the perspective of the abysmal data fudging and
Yes.
lack of transparency across this country. Congress states or BJP states, I don't care. As an individual who's lost somebody in this pandemic, I can tell you this, that the blatant data fudging that is happening, how is this country ever to get access
Yes.
to even anecdotal contradictions? Forget about statistical. We are never nowhere there. But anecdotal contradictions. We have headed down a dangerous path because, as Suhel correctly said, this ability and the inclination of people to just talk in the air without facts or logic or be informed by logic or facts. We've just taken leave of that. We just want to beat drums and talk about nationalism, as Advaita said earlier, and talk about hum kyun the indemnity. You want the spectacle of company officers then being hauled in by police officers from all over the country because somebody has died. Potentially, some important person has died 1 hour after a jab. You are going to have havoc in the country if you don't have some sense, some reason, some logic informing your policies. Unless you have that, you're not going to get
Tell me, Abhijit, do we have a national scientific advisor in India? I'm seriously asking. I don't know.
We have a principal scientific advisor, but see, the problem with scientists in this country is that they're not really scientists; they're bureaucrats. They are bureaucrats who studied science in school and college, but they're bureaucrats. Unfortunately, you see, so that becomes highly problematic. I just wanted to add one quick point to what Suhel said when he said we need to invest more of the GDP on health. Remember, health has two parts to it. One is the infrastructure, the other is the human. And health is one of those things you can't learn by rote. It's fundamentally a problem-solving exercise. So, when you invest on your health, you also have to up your human investment and your problem-solving capacity, which in India, as we know, it is entirely learned by rote. You disincentivize problem-solving. So, for the health sector to improve, it is not just the outlay on the health infrastructure that has to improve. It is also the quality of the doctor that has to improve, which is to say that the education system has to improve. Right? And by education system, I mean the primary education and the kind of education you're giving in terms of problem solving.
Okay, I think this has been a really constructive conversation. I want to thank you all for sparing the time today. I think we'll know in a couple of days whether this is going through. Most people seem to think that the government is going to grant indemnity of some sort, if not entirely. And that should make a certain number of doses accessible to our country. As always, we're running against time when it comes to this virus. And the threat of it mutating is always there in the background. And the only way to protect ourselves from that sort of situation is really to get more and more people vaccinated quickly. So let's hope the right decisions are taken with the correct amount of contemplation and deliberation. I thank you all again for joining me this evening, and of course look forward to
I want to, on all our behalf, on behalf of an entire nation, profusely, sincerely thank Dr. Thadani and all his colleagues for the remarkable service. I'm not play acting or sounding unnecessarily emotional. I have seen personal pain. I have seen people going out of their way. And I have tweeted, the way they've taken care of relatives I know, my own mother. And I have to say, aapki wajah se hum hain, ye desh hai, or we will never be able to repay you this debt of gratitude, no matter how much we try. But it's important for us to tell you, thank you, may you live long, and may you continue to inspire and help this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And really, thank you to parents too, who insisted that kids become engineers and doctors, the Indian parent. So thanks to them as well. I'm not going to criticize them anymore. At least it's helped our generation, and hopefully this pandemic will not appear for ever again, or at least not for another 100 years, and spare the next couple of generations, because it's really a life-altering situation. Thank you again, and goodbye to my viewers. Thank you for being engaging with us. And of course, to my panelists who answered their questions, and even sometimes, well,